In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front struts on this Hyundai Santa Fe. Let's install this brand new TRQ part. Use a 21mm socket and take all 5 of your lug nuts off, then we can remove the wheel. If your wheel is stuck, give it a couple taps and remove the wheel. Let's remove the axle nut. It takes a 32mm socket. However, before you do that, you have to straighten out this little area that is punched in. This is what locks the axle nut. So take a little punch or a chisel and a hammer and tap it in here. You don't have to get it perfectly straightened out, but just enough for the axle nut to be able to slide off a little bit easier, especially if you're doing this with a breaker bar. Okay, that's the best it's going to get. Let's grab a 32mm socket and remove the axle nut. If you're using a breaker bar, you're going to want to hold the hub, so otherwise it'll just keep spinning. Okay. At this point, you want to make sure your axle pushes through and it's not seized in the hub on the splines. If it is, spray some rust penetrant, take a center punch chisel and try to punch it through. Mine looks like it's good, so I can move on. I'm going to take this 12mm headed bolt off for this bracket. That way when we pull the knuckle forward, it gives me a lot more space. I don't want to pull on the brake hose or the ABS wire. That'll damage both of them. Take this off, set that aside. To add some more slack to the ABS wire on the back side of this clip, pinch in those 2 little tabs and you should be able to slide this clip through. Just like that. Follow the ABS wire. On this wheel arch here, you'll see where the bracket for the ABS wire bolts on with a 12mm headed bolt. Remove that. This gives us even more slack in the wire. Let's remove the 2 strut bolts. These are 17mm in size on the bolt head. On the other side, you will have to use a 19mm wrench or socket to hold the nut. Remove both of these. I'm not going to take that bolt out yet. I'm going to leave it in so I can support everything while I loosen up the bottom. Okay, those are both loose. Now move the knuckle around and push these through. Pull this lower bolt out, drop the knuckle down, make sure none of this gets pulled too far. Push the axle through. There we go. All right, there's no pressure on either of these, so we can continue. Take a 17mm socket and remove the mounting nut that goes on the sway bar end link on through the strut here. Sometimes these get stuck, so you'll have to hold the sway bar link from the back side. In this case, looks like it wasn't very stuck. Push the sway bar link through. To get access to the top of the strut, we actually have to go through the engine bay, and this cowl piece has a door that you can pry open with a trim tool. Once you pry this open and remove it, you can see all 3 mounting nuts for the top of the strut. You can stick a ratchet in there and loosen them all up. 14mm socket is what you need to remove all 3 mounting nuts from the top of the shock. Doesn't matter where you start, but break them all free. They should not be too tight. And then, of course, remove them. I'm going to leave that one for last because it's the easiest one to get to. And on the last one, we're going to have to hold the strut from the bottom. So I want to be able to easily access it. That way it doesn't fall down and damage anything. Once you break it free and turn it a few turns, you should be able to remove this by hand. There's the second one on this third one. Once I get about halfway off of the threads, I'm going to reach in at the bottom and support it, like I said, so it doesn't fall down. Grab onto the strut, hold it safely. Oh, there we go, that just fell down. Finish removing the mounting nut, and once that's off, you should be able to carefully remove your strut assembly. There it is. When you look at the new strut from the top, you'll see that one of the edges has a larger rounder area on it, whereas these are not perfectly flat, but they are almost flat. So you want to make sure that the rounder part faces outward from the vehicle, so basically lines up with the bottom of the strut where it clamps onto the knuckle. Once that's done, you should be able to slide it right up into the vehicle with no problem. Carefully slide the strut in. Once you have it in, start on one mounting nut so you can let go without it falling off. Now thread on the other two mounting nuts, get them seated. You can move the strut around if needed to get those studs to poke through a little bit more. Let's snug these down, and the torque for all three of these mounting nuts is 54 foot-pounds. However, after I snug them, I will not torque them yet because you need the full weight of the vehicle pressing up on the strut to properly torque these down, so we're going to do this at the end. But for now, I do want to snug them up. That way the strut can stay properly secured in here without moving around. If you're using the new mounting nuts provided with the strut, they are a 15 millimeter in size. However, if your old ones are good, you can reuse those as well. All right, let's put everything else back together, and then at the end we'll come back here and torque everything. On the splines of the axle, I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize, just a thin coating. This way, in the future, if it has to be removed from the hub, it is less likely to be stuck, and it should come out nice and easy, just like it did earlier when we pulled it out. A thin layer will do the trick. If you put too much, it'll just squeeze out as you drive the axle in. Okay, that should be good. Now grab your CV axle, put it back into the hub, line up those splines, and now we're going to have our strut bolts ready. Make sure the ABS wire as well as the brake hose are not going to get pinched here. Spin the strut if needed. Pull the knuckle up. Try to line up at least one bolt. There we go. Push it through. Now grab your bottom bolt, move everything around until this one lines up. If you need to tap the bolt in, be gentle. You don't want to smash any of your wires, hoses, anything here. These are both lined up, so let's put the mounting nuts on the other side. Now let's tighten them down and torque them. Hold the mounting nut with a 19 millimeter wrench. Press in on the knuckle. I know this doesn't really have an adjustment to it, but it has a little bit of wiggle room, and it's always best to start pushed inward. You're gonna have to let your alignment professional do the rest from here anyway. Snug this up. Once you snug up one, the knuckle should stay in place, so let's snug up the other. 116 foot-pounds is the torque for this. On this lower one, it'll be difficult to torque the nut side just because the caliper's in the way, so I'm gonna torque the bolt side. Hold the mounting nut in case it wants to spin. That's 116 on that one. Let's do the top one from here. There we go, those are both tightened. Let's reinstall this bracket, line it up, and put that 12 millimeter headed bolt back in. Put on the mounting bolt for this ABS wire bracket, snug it up. Now let's reattach this bracket, resecure it to the strut. Snug up the bolt. Reattach the ABS wire. Reinstall the axle nut. I'm going to bottom it out with my impact, but then of course I will torque it. I put a pry bar through the lug studs to prevent this from spinning as I torque it. 217 foot-pounds is the torque for this axle nut. There it is right there. At the top here, you'll see that the axle has a slot. Let's stake down the axle nut, grab a chisel or a punch, whatever you have, and just squish it down a little bit to lock it in. That should be good right there. Now let's reinstall the sway bar link through the strut. There we go. put the mounting nut on. Let's tighten it up. The torque on this is 87 foot-pounds. That's it right there. Put the wheel back on. Thread on all 5 of your lug nuts by hand to make sure they don't cross-thread. And then in a cross pattern, I'm going to bottom them out and snug them. And the torque for these is between 65 and 79 foot-pounds. I'm going to go for 79 in a cross pattern. Double check them. All right, we're back. After the wheel is on, vehicle's on the ground, 54 foot-pounds. That's 1. Doesn't matter what order you torque them in. That's 2. All right, that's the 3rd one. They're all torqued. Let's put back this cover. There you have it. Now you can go get yourself an alignment.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.